We're live.
Good evening, everyone, and welcome to your City of Morganton Board of Land Use Adjustment Appeals. My name is Thomas Ure, and I serve as the chair of this board, and we will progress tonight in an orderly fashion. To my right is Board Member Johnny Carswell, Dale Britton, Bryant Lindsay, and Susan Sheilor, and we will proceed with a review and approval, if so inclined, of the minutes from the Morganton Board of Land Use Adjustment hearing on February the 10th, 2025, this year instant. I would ask the members of the board, if you've had an opportunity to review those previously published minutes to you, and at the appropriate time that you feel so inclined, I would entertain a motion that they be approved.
I entertain a motion for them to be approved.
So for the record, Mr. Britton has moved that the minutes be approved without amendment. Is there a second to his motion?
Second.
Motion's been made and seconded. Is there any discussion related to the minutes from the February 10th, 2025 meeting? The chair's opinion, hearing none, all in favor, please say aye for approval of the minutes.
Aye. Aye.
All opposed, like sign. In the opinion of the chair, Madam Clerk, the minutes are approved. Good evening again, everyone, and welcome again to your Board of Land Use Adjustment. I'd remind everyone that this is being recorded and live online for our citizens to participate if they so choose. We're going to hear one case tonight on the calendar. Case is case number 02-25, which is an application for a variance. It's an important word that I will go into detail about here in a moment, but just remember that this is an application for a variance from section 4.2.4, the non-residential dimensional standards of the City of Morganton's zoning ordinance. And it's a request for an expansion of a front setback from 5 feet maximum to 64 feet. The application for a variance shall be decided, and this is critical for your understanding tonight in the audience, and of course the applicant, will be decided by a minimum requirement of 4/5 vote of this board. And of course you'll notice there's 5 members of our board, and obviously that necessitates that 4 members of this board be in accord in order to approve a variance. And given the fact that I've already intimated that there are special circumstances around the approval of a variance, I want to read for you directly from our North Carolina statute, because everything we do tonight truly is governed by North Carolina state law. And I think it's important for everyone in the audience to understand the very limited function of this Board of Land Use Adjustment that's governed by North Carolina law. And so with regard to the statute, I'm reading directly from section 160D-705, subparagraph D, variances. When unnecessary hardships would result from carrying out the strict letter of a zoning regulation or ordinance, the Board of Adjustment shall vary any of the provisions of the zoning regulation upon a showing of all of the following. And there are 4 elements that this board must agree with tonight in order to approve a variance from the zoning ordinance. And they are these. Number 1, that there be an unnecessary hardship would result from the strict application of the regulation. It is not necessary to demonstrate that in the absence of a variance, no reasonable use can be made of the property. Number 2, the hardship results from conditions that are peculiar to the property, such as location, size, or topography. hardships resulting from personal circumstances, as well as hardships resulting from conditions that are common to the neighborhood or the general public, may not be the basis for granting a variance. There's a passage in here about the Fair Housing Act, and I'll not read that as it's not relevant for tonight. But Section 3, the third element for the granting of a variance, says this: the hardship did not result from actions taken by the applicant or the property owner. The act of purchasing property with knowledge that circumstances exist that may justify the granting of a variance is not a self-creating hardship. And then number 4, the requested variance is consistent with the spirit, purpose, and intent of the regulation such that public safety is secured and substantial justice is achieved. Before we begin tonight, it is important for everyone to understand some important facts related to the meeting tonight. This Board of Adjustment meeting is known as a quasi-judicial proceeding in the state of North Carolina, which means it functions much like a court proceeding in which one's individual rights are being determined. Testimony will be limited to only those issues concerning whether the application should ultimately be approved. The legal purpose of this quasi-judicial hearing, this is important, is not to gather public opinions and suggestions as to the policy to be applied or the ordinance to be applied. The policy or ordinance is already set forth directly in the City of Morganton's zoning ordinance. The board making the decision must apply those existing policies to a specific application. The purpose of the evidentiary hearing tonight is to gather legally sufficient factual evidence to apply those standards to the application based upon, and here's the criteria we'll use tonight, competent, material, and substantial evidence in the record. At this time, I would ask any board members whether or not you feel like you cannot sit as an impartial decision maker in today's proceeding due to a conflict of interest. Mr. Carswell, I'll turn to you.
I have no conflict of interest, sir.
Mr. Britton.
I have no conflict of interest.
Mr. Lindsay.
No conflicts.
Ms. Shaylor.
No conflicts.
And the chair does not have a conflict of either that I'll announce. The order of business for this hearing will be for the case as follows. First, the city's official overseeing the Morganton Development and Design Services will provide an overview of the application for the board. Board members will in turn be allowed to ask questions they deem appropriate. There will be, then we will hear from the applicant, who will present evidence in support of the request and answer any questions from members of the board about the evidence presented. And then anyone else who desires to be a party to this matter or would like to be heard, we will entertain you as well. At this point in time, I would ask if the applicant is present tonight for purposes of this hearing, Mr. Isaac Fisher, BDF Properties, LLC. All right. And Mr. Fisher, are you prepared to testify tonight? Yes. All right. And the City of Morganton, I see, is president, and you're prepared to testify tonight. Other than Mr. Fisher and Ms. Smith with the city, is there anyone else who believes themselves to be a party to this matter? And yes, sir, could you please state your name?
Elijah Fisher.
Elijah Fisher. And sir, how are you a party to this matter?
I lead business, and I live above the business on the corner of South Douglas Street.
All right, so you're also a co-applicant with the matter. Are you intending to testify tonight? All right. Is there anyone else who would deem themselves to be a party to this matter? All right. Is there anyone else who has given notice that they would like to be heard tonight? No one did that. Okay. Then I think what I'd like to do at this point in time is go ahead and swear the witnesses. And so if we can be efficient, I would like to ask all three persons who indicated they were going to testify tonight, if you're so inclined, if you would come up and place your left hand on the Bible. If you're willing to do that, I can also do an affirmation, which I'll just include in the. Do you swear or affirm to tell the whole truth, nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
I do.
All right, thank you very much. Y'all can be seated. I now go ahead and open the hearing, the public hearing regarding the application that I've already indicated, and would ask for testimony from the City of Morganton official overseeing the Department of Development and Design regarding this application. If you would state your full name, your position with the city, and if you would proceed with your testimony.
My name's Wendy Smith. I'm the Director of Development and Design Services.
Thank you, Ms. Smith. And what would you like for the board to know with regard to this application?
Yes, I'll just log on to the computer and bring up the maps so that you can make sure we are all seeing the same thing. Chad, if you could put my screen on there for a moment or two. So the subject site is 400 South Sterling Street, which is this property, which is adjacent immediately to another property also addressed as 400 South Sterling Street. And there is a combination of development or a continuation of development proposed onto this other parcel. The parcel on the corner of West McDowell and South Sterling Street is currently developed with the retail business for Over Mountain Rifleman, and there is a single apartment above. And the site is bordered by South Sterling Street and West McDowell Street. Currently accesses both streets, South Sterling and West McDowell, and if developed as proposed, the sites would function as one site. That's why we're talking about both sites tonight. The building on the corner site was originally constructed according to Burke GIS records in 1965. In 2021, the current applicants expanded the structure, turned the upper floor of the structure into a single-family residence or single apartment up there, and then also expanded this portion on the side towards West McDowell Street to provide a deck for that residential use and undercover parking on there. That expansion made this side of the building go much closer to West McDowell Street than it originally did, making it less non-conforming structure than it originally was. The applicant has requested a variance to these front setback requirements in the Central Business District, or CBD, as I refer to it now on. And the applicant has requested to site the building 64 feet from the property edge, which is almost a 1,300% increase in the allowable setback for that zone. I will note that there is one portion in your report that did say 75 feet, the staff report. That was an initial Burke GIS measurement, and then we got actual measurements from the applicant. So the one reference to 75 feet, ignore that, it's 64 feet we're asking for. As the chair stated, variance applications must prove unnecessary hardship that would result from carrying out the provisions of the zoning ordinance. Would like to state on behalf of the city, remind everyone, these are state statutes. They're not the opinion of the city or the zoning officials, but a measurement of those existing rules for the city against the general statutes. The hardship has to result from conditions peculiar to the property, such as location, size, and topography. It is questionable as to whether a hardship can be granted on the basis of structures on the site rather than the property itself, as the variance runs with the parcel of land and not with the structures on the land. For example, the applicants could receive, I'm not suggesting they are going to, but they could receive a 64-foot setback based on the location of the existing structure, tear that building down tomorrow, and they'd still have the 64-foot setback on the other property. So it's supposed to be basis on these peculiar circumstances for the property, not necessarily the structures or the buildings on the property. Hardships resulting from personal circumstances, as well as hardships resulting from conditions common to the neighborhood or general public, may not be the basis for granting a variance, and the variance must be consistent with the spirit, purpose, and intent of the zoning regulation. It must also not impinge upon public safety, and I think no one is proposing that it would from either side at this point. So as noted, the applicant has requested that variance to the central business district requirements, the 64 feet. However, within the central business district, the front setback is set at a minimum of 0 feet and a maximum of 5 feet. So it's clearly the intent to have the buildings located at the street edge. In general, the 5 feet allows for building doors to open outward, where the building code would require them to do so without having to open out over the sidewalk, which then might hit somebody walking along the sidewalk. So that's why a lot of the buildings downtown have that little alcove built in, and that's where you get your varying setback in there. The ordinance's stated intent of this district is to provide a concentration of activities in a pedestrian-oriented setting. That pedestrian-oriented setting is a standard, long-held zoning practice to have areas of concentrated pedestrian activity within the downtown to promote walking along the street frontage, looking into businesses, and carrying the activity further down the street. Pedestrian interaction with the building is an essential planning element for a CBD. All new development within the CBD needs to follow this pattern as much as possible for that intent to be successful. Otherwise, you'll have pedestrians getting to the big empty parking lot, and they go, oh, well, I think I must have got to the end of the CBD, and businesses on further down the street would not necessarily benefit from that continuing pedestrian coverage. This is something that was discussed when we did the comprehensive plan update, and there was a lot of discussion around it, and ultimately the comprehensive plan continued that CBD pattern, or proposed that that be the continued pattern throughout that, because of some of the properties further on down towards the railroad bridge, like the Alpine Mills at that stage development, where the old night furniture building and things are. They didn't want there to be a block in that, and the Burke Arts Council on further down the street, we wanted to continue that pattern rather than having a break between the different portions of the CBD. Again, the planning intent is to minimize a pedestrian's interaction with vehicles, not to increase parking areas at the street edge. Parking in the CBD is expected to be provided along the street in concentrated city-owned lots, or to be provided at the rear of the building, the rear of the business. That's why there's no minimum parking requirements in the CBD, to encourage those use of the on-street and shared lots and to limit that vehicle parking areas for each of the businesses. The applicant's stated hardship are that placing the building along the street would result in the elimination of parking and an unsightly building. And the application mentions the desire to provide abundant parking on several occasions. However, even while we're noting that placing the parking on the site at the street frontage goes against the pedestrian-oriented nature of the ordinance, it's also acknowledged that reconfiguration of a building located on the street would still allow room for some parking on the lot at that street edge where it currently exists. There are currently 5 spaces on the street directly in front of the business. If there was a reconfiguration of the building, you eliminated the existing driveway on South Sterling Street, for example, you could get 2 more on-street spaces. The planning and division has worked with the applicant to show a variety of different ways that the property could be developed, and I've just put one on the screen because that was asked for in the application, but there weren't examples provided. So this is what's proposed. The rectangular blue square shows what the applicant is proposing. You get a similar square footage, in fact about 100 other square feet, by turning that building and narrowing it just a little bit, and you can leave the access where it currently is and manage to get 8 parking spaces on the same amount of site. So you can still bring the building up to the street frontage according to the zoning requirements, and this is just one of the examples that was given to the applicant, and still meet the city's goals of getting a building at the street frontage, still meet the applicant's goals of a similar square footage and parking on the site. So that's just an example of some alternatives that are generally asked for in the application. Chad, you can take that down if you want. Building the building in the proposed location at the back of the lot would likely lock that site in that same format for another 50 years with the building lives that we generally have in Morganton. That would create that break in the pedestrian environment and would affect the downtown and other surrounding businesses for years to come. As an example, we said the current building has been there for 60-some years. If we build another building there, it may still be there for that long as well. And you've created this break in your zoning pattern that's unlikely to be fixed. You've created this, what would be a classic suburban development of parking out front and a building at the back of the lot in your central business district. It's also submitted that the applicant's concerns over creating an unsightly building is an opinion that the board can't really consider, as it's one of personal circumstance, and again, opinion. A designer could work, again, any new building with the format of that existing one, but as we mentioned, it's questionable whether the board consider the building itself or just the property as the reason for the hardship. As to whether the site is unique, I stopped counting when I got to over 50 properties in the downtown that are on a street corner and have 2 street frontages. I believe 10 of those are developed with non-residential sites with buildings not currently built to CBD setbacks, maybe 11. All of the properties from King Street to the Railroad Bridge along South Sterling Street have that same flat frontage along South Sterling Street and a steep slope up behind them. That's 20-some properties. That site itself is completely flat with no hindrances to development. As we note in the staff report, both lots are average size to the CBD. Nothing unusual for this specific property. The properties along the same block are within 1/10 of an acre of the same size as these properties. So it is the staff submission that all property-related items are not specific to this property, but are common to the neighborhood in general. And as we noted, hardships resulting from personal circumstances may not be the basis for granting a variance. In layman's terms, boiled down to because I want to, are not reasons that the board can consider. The property owner is able to make reasonable use of the property in a variety of ways, as we noted earlier. And in order to obtain a variance, the applicant bears that burden of providing competent, substantial, and relevant evidence that the property meets all the statutory standards that the chair mentioned. For a variance, merely showing some hardship is insufficient. The hardship must be more than a mere inconvenience or preference for a more lenient standard. We submit that it does not meet those standards.
Ms. Smith, is there any other information you would like to share with the board before we ask you questions?
Not at this time, but if there are times later on in the hearing where you'd like me to clarify something from the zoning ordinance or some other relevant planning position, I'd be welcome to do so.
So in the chair's discretion, I'll ask you at the end of the hearing, at the presentation of evidence, if there's any additional information you would like to share
That would be fine.
after we've moved forward, and we'll progress with questions at this point in time. And I would turn to my colleague, Mr. Carswell, and sir, the witness is with you.
No questions at this time, sir.
All right. And Mr. Britton, the witness is with you.
No questions this time.
All right. Mr. Lindsay, I'll turn to you. The witness is with you, sir.
I think I'd like to reserve the right to ask some questions later, if we may.
Of this witness, and we've...
this witness.
Yes, sir, I understand, and we've indicated that we may call you back, so just be prepared to do that. And then Ms. Shelor, the witness is with you for any questions you'd like to... All right, thank you, Ms. Shelor. Ms. Smith, the chair does have some questions I'd like to ask, and really, more than anything, just help me to, at the outset, to better understand the city's zoning ordinance. So, am I correct in understanding that the current ordinance for Zone CBD, Central Business District, requires setback restrictions of a minimum of 0 and a maximum of 5 feet from road frontage? Is that right?
That is correct.
And with regard to the actual language of the ordinance, I noticed in the discussion document that you provided for the board ahead of time to prepare us for tonight's hearing, that there's a quotation mark used that says the zoning ordinance states, quote, and I just wanted to better understand if this comes straight from the zoning ordinance. It is the intent of this district Zone CBD, Central Business District, to provide a concentration of activities in a pedestrian-oriented setting. Is that sentence straight from the zoning ordinance?
It is, and Chad, if you can bring up my screen, you can see where that is. That's in the explanation of the base zoning district and central business district. Central business district is established to protect and promote the continued vitality of downtown Morganton. It is the intent of this district to provide a concentration of activities in a pedestrian-oriented setting. These activities include retail, trade, office, and professional service uses, as well as high-density residential.
Thank you, Ms. Smith. That's very helpful to me. And so, secondly, I'd like to explore with you, I believe you indicated in your testimony that you had a meeting or so with the applicant. Can you first off tell me how many meetings you had with the applicant regarding this matter?
I believe at least 3 in-person meetings and a phone call or 2 between both of the Mr. Fishers. I would say 5 or 6 conversations.
And so I want to talk about those meetings a little bit, but before I get there, of course, as I've already iterated and would reiterate, of course, the key for us tonight is to explore the hardship issue of any applicant who comes before this board. And so with regard to the property in question, is there, and you may have said this in your testimony, but I just want to make sure I'm clear, is there anything peculiar about the property that, from a topographical standpoint or any other aspect of the real property, the real estate, that would be something you would like this board to be aware of concerning its any kind of indication about any problem with the property?
No, sir. Chad's put on my screen. The property's flat. At the rear of the property, at the property boundary, it does go up the hill there. As you can see, that hill continues down South Sterling Street. And to be familiar, even behind other stuff on further up South Sterling Street, there's that same pattern of that. As I said, there are probably 100 different street corners with 2 corners and access to both of those. There's probably a dozen or so that are developed with non-residential buildings. There's more developed with non-residential, like parking lots and those sorts of things. Typically, from a zoning perspective, something peculiar about the property might be something such as it's a wedge-shaped piece of property, so it makes it difficult to meet the standards. Or as previously became before the board, it's a very narrow 50 by 50 property, and the setbacks were 55, so they couldn't build anything on the property. Or there's quite a topography change, and none of those are occurring here on this property. Furthermore, the property has the exact same layout as you would submit dozens of properties in the CBD.
Oftentimes, as you know, when we are considering a variance in particular, we're having to explore the hardship issue. And I'm interested in particular whether or not you had an opportunity in your 3 or 4 meetings, including your additional phone call with the applicant, if you had an opportunity to discuss other options. You indicated in your testimony that you may have done that. If you could speak to that for me, I'd be appreciative.
We did. It is not necessarily the job of the planners to design a building, but we like to always go above and beyond what you can't do to what you can do on the site. And we have those discussions all the time with a variety of applicants about what the different options are to develop. And sometimes that's because the property owners don't often do development, and we see things and we see possibilities that they don't. We know the measurements that are required for parking spaces, parking aisle widths, that sort of thing. So we have these discussions all the time, and we're well prepared to do so. They may or may not be choices that the applicant wants for their building, but we feel it's our duty to present as many of those as possible, and then the applicant can make an informed choice about what they may or may not do. In this instance, you can go to 65 feet in that for well, you can go to 65 feet for non-residential. You can go to 35 feet for residential without performance point standards. So you can get a variety of heights on there if you wanted to add on to just an upper floor levels to those buildings. There is the area, it is our understanding they want to expand both the residence and the retail portion of the business. So Chad, if you can go back onto the screen. The buildings back here, if you wanted to stay within the same property, you could develop within the ordinance requirements and develop forward of the other building. That may not be as desirable for them because they have put the porch on the building that you could see in the other images that we provided. But in particular, the item that we thought might be best laid out and what we would have recommended had somebody just come to us with a blank site was to extend the building out towards the street. One of the hindrances of this site is that as you go down South Sterling Street, you don't see the building. So if you're here, you don't even know there's anything on that site until you get here and you're almost past it. So from a design perspective, if you pull the building out to the street, you could put some signage and things here that might make it a more attractive development site, might catch people's eyes. Again, they don't have to do that, but there's just options that they could do. This one, I think the building that they've provided was 32 by 68, which is 2,176 square feet. This building at 24 by 99, going all the way up to the property line, they could drop it back that 5 feet, was 2,300 square feet. That preserves their existing driveway crossover into the property and does get those 8 parking spaces all on the property without interrupting that pedestrian atmosphere down through there. So those were just 3 of the options that we had discussed with them during those meetings.
So those options that you discussed with them would be compliant with the City of Morganton zoning
Yes,
ordinance? And those options were discussed with the candidate?
Yes.
The applicant, is that right?
sir.
Ms. Smith, I don't have any other questions, but I would ask you to stand down, and we may call you back invite you to do that if needs be. And at this time, I would ask the applicants, the 2 gentlemen, Mr. Fisher's, I believe both y'all were surnamed Fisher, if y'all can come on up in the order within which you believe you want to testify. Welcome, Mr. Fisher. And if you'll come forward, sir, and welcome again tonight. And if you would please state your full name and your, affirm that you're a resident here in Morganton. You don't have to give us your address, but if you just would affirm that, and then proceed with whatever you would like for us to know about this application, and then we'll ask you questions
Okay.
subsequent to that.
My name is Isaac Fisher. I am not a resident of Morganton.
Okay,
Although I own multiple properties in the city limits of Morganton,
that's fine.
and I live at Silver Creek Plantation.
Okay, well, good. And sir, please feel free to share with us the information you would like us to know regarding your application consistent with the criteria that we've discussed.
Okay, well, first thing, I'll have to disagree with Ms. Smith about the elevation of the property. There is close to 3 feet of difference from the back of the building to the front of the existing building now. It is solid rock under that slab. And it is solid rock on the bank behind the building. So, you know, if we come straight out the way she has got it planned, there's going to be, we'll have to do a step down in the building and have stairs in the building itself. Or if we go level to the street, there's going to be 4 feet difference in the front of the building at the street. When I purchased the building back, I don't know, 5 or 6 years ago, there was a structure on the south side of the building, already. We took it off because it was not a very good-looking structure. And there was also another structure at the property line that we also removed. So there was existing structures all the way across there when I purchased the building. Yeah, a typical storefront building here in Morganton is 40 to 50 feet wide. The one that she is proposing is 24 feet wide by 90-some feet long. I mean, that is not conducive to a good store being able to,
Terrible.
be in usable floor space. And, that's pretty much my argument.
All right, thank you so much. And then, if, sir, we would like to progress now with asking you any questions the board may have, and certainly, we'll progress in that order. Mr. Carswell, I'll turn to you. The witness is with you, sir.
I have no questions at this time, sir.
All right, thank you. And, Mr. Britton, any questions from you for Mr. Fisher?
Not at this time.
All right, Mr. Lindsay, I'll turn to you to ask any questions you have for Mr. Fisher based on his testimony.
Mr. Fisher, you indicated that it would be unsightly, based on the plans that were drawn for you by the city. And, from an aesthetic standpoint, I feel that myself. I don't know that that's sufficient to overcome any other objections that might be raised. But I wanted to raise it with you because you didn't address that in your testimony at this point.
Yes. Well, the existing building has a barrel-shaped roof on it. And, when you turn that and make a 90-degree turn to go to the city, I mean, that does not make a very good-looking building. No. I mean, it looks a whole lot better if we continue the same style of building all the way down, and a lot more usable building.
I appreciate your comment in that regard. I do have he can't address a legal question, and I guess we need to wait and go back after his testimony is finished. The director of development raised a legal issue, and I don't know that she can address the legal issue. It may be that only the town's attorney can address that. But
No, sir, the town's attorney doesn't address that. This board addresses any issues tonight, and I've set forth the requirements this board has to
Okay, I'll raise it
to
with her.
grant a variance. Any other questions for the witness? Mr. Lindsay?
I'd like to reserve it for later.
Ms. Shelor, I'll turn to you now and ask if you.
I don't have anything at this time.
Thank you, Ms. Shelor. I do have some questions for you,
Okay.
please, sir, and thank you for being here tonight. It's important, and I think this board takes your application very seriously. I want to say that up front. I want to understand a bit about this issue that you raised where the property goes from, I think you said, a 3 feet difference between the back of the building and the front. Is that what you testified
Yes,
to?
it's between 2 and 3 feet.
Yeah, and so help me understand why that presents a peculiar hardship to that real estate's design or further design such that you now need a variance from the city's zoning ordinance to allow you additional parking or a 64-foot setback from the road frontage. Help me understand how that's related to your request to get a 64-foot setback.
I don't know that I really understand your question.
Well, I'll try and re-ask it. You've testified and you want us to know that there's a 3-foot difference from the back of the building to the front of the building.
Correct.
How is that relevant or related to your request,
I don't understand that either.
to your request? How does that information related to your request for a hardship from the city's zoning ordinance that requires a minimum of 0 feet to 5 feet setback for purposes of road frontage.
Well,
How's that relevant or related?
it is relevant to the fact that, you know, the building, existing building now, I would have to put steps inside the building to get from the elevation of the existing building now down to street level to the sidewalk.
Mr. Fisher, trust me, I'm trying to help me understand, but don't other businesses in town on occasion have to put in steps or ramps or other things to address differences in elevation on the real estate?
It's possible. I guess there is buildings in town with, on the first floor where you would maybe go up 2 or 3 feet. I don't know.
Mr. Fisher, isn't it fair to say that, or I guess help me understand what would be peculiar about this property and having a 3-foot difference in elevation that would be, constitute a hardship that's just for that real estate?
Well, I don't guess it is just for that real estate. I mean, if you had that problem anywhere in the city, you'd have the same problem.
And so, Ms. Smith testified, you heard her, that there were, I guess, a series of meetings that may have occurred with you or the applicant, the entire applicant group. Did those meetings occur?
Yes.
And can you tell us your perspective on what was discussed at those meetings when they occurred? How many were there and what did y'all discuss?
There was 4 or 5, and it was pretty much what Ms. Smith said. I mean, you know, we discussed, you know, the different, or the formations that she suggested. And, you know, you build onto the front of the building, we've got to shut the business down. I mean, you know, you cannot construct a building, you know, in front of that and maintain a business. It would be just impossible.
I want to understand, are you now testifying that constructing a building is not possible?
No, I'm saying that, you know, it would not be possible to maintain the business while you were constructing a building in front of what we've got there now.
That would not be that would be a result of your decision to close the business, though, for purposes of the construction, right?
Yes.
That would not, I just want to make sure I understand, that would not be a result of the real estate and some hardship associated with the real estate that would create that problem. Is that fair to say?
The construction of that building in front of it would make it impossible to have customers coming in to the building.
I just want to understand, though, that would be your decision on whether or not to do that construction, correct?
Yes.
And you understand the city ordinance that requires a 0 minimum to a 5 feet minimum, maximum for road frontage for businesses. You understand that?
Yes.
All right. Mr. Fisher, I don't have any further questions for you, and so thank you very much on behalf of the city of Morganton. And now we'll turn to you, Mr. Fisher, and afford you an opportunity as well to introduce yourself to us. Thank you, Mr. Fisher.
Thank
Hi, my name is Elijah Fisher. I'm both a resident and business owner at 400 South Sterling Street.
Welcome, sir. Please feel free to tell the board anything you'd like for us to know regarding your application.
Yeah, first I think I have some media that I sent in. I think it's a rendition of the building as well as the proposed building alternative plans. This is our proposed addition. On the right-hand portion is the existing, our storefront. So we have 3 rooms. We have our storefront, what's labeled as a storage space, as well as a restroom. we're proposing to approximately triple our retail space as well as add a larger storage area onto our business. Should be also another drawing piece. This is a architecture drawing of the overall lot, of the outside and side views of the building as well. And this is the kind of rendition I had made of kind of the proposed idea of what it possibly would look like as well. So it's very unconventional building shape, very non-conforming in, many aspects. The roof shape is definitely different from what you see usually downtown as well. There's one more piece, I believe. Okay. So, some notes here, excuse me for 1 second. So with the proposed addition bringing the door within the 5 feet of the sidewalk and street, it provides 7 kind of key issues that I feel. It does kind of divide our parking lot up as well. So we have approximately 24 parking spaces, depending on the vehicle size, right now. This would reduce us approximately to 6 or 7 parking spaces total if we bring the building to the road with the proposed idea. The building width of 24 feet, I feel, as a business owner, is playing into the same issue we're having as a business now, which is just kind of a narrow space. And while it is greater square footage, which is great, it does not, I feel, cover the issues my business is having. So if we bring the building forward, we lose a tree that was required for us to be planted in front of our building. We will have to get rid of that as well as a grassy area that was also required for us when we originally redesigned the building back in 2021. Like many businesses downtown, we get a lot of deliveries. FedEx, UPS, Postal Service, it's every day. Having 2 entrances to our parking lot speeds up the delivery, so we're not congesting traffic, and it's a timely manner of unloading and loading a truck very quickly and efficiently. I think everything else is already covered previously. But I know we're not planning to expand the residence. This is just the business standpoint, so there is no residential expansion. But I still have some concerns of if we were built on the front, possibly re-roofing it. I may have to move out of that residence, and that does definitely cause some issues as well. But that's pretty much all I have.
Thank you, Mr. Fisher, and appreciate you sharing that important information with the board tonight. I'll turn to Mr. Carswell, sir, and ask you if you have any questions for Mr. Fisher based on his testimony tonight.
Not at this time, sir.
And Mr. Britton, any questions for the witness?
Not this time.
Mr. Lindsay, questions for the witness?
Mr. Fisher, I'd like to understand the cost implications of doing what the city proposes to do as opposed to either leaving it alone because you're so compromised by the changes or by developing it the way the city would like to, to have you do it.
Probably monetary costs would be, maybe you can speak to this a little better than I can, probably around the same, a little higher at most. I don't think it'd be too much difference. My father may can speak more of that than I can.
No, I don't think it would be a tremendous amount of difference. Probably a little bit more cost because it'd be more grading. You would have to do excavating, cutting out, and like I said, it's solid rock under that concrete. So, it would involve some rock removal.
So it would not cost you more to do what the city is asking?
Yeah, it would cost a little more,
Okay.
for sure.
Would it compromise your use of the property, in your opinion?
I believe it does in breaking up our parking, as well as kind of the issues my business has in the small state it is now, and about 1,100 square foot as existing. Wouldn't really solve the issue of the expansion overall, I believe.
The city raised the issue of whether or not it would be improper to grant a variance based on a grandfathering of the previous property and whether that could carry over, but neither of you are attorneys, and the city's representative is not an attorney, and so I didn't know how to address that when the question was raised before. And I don't know if it's appropriate to ask you if you've consulted an attorney in that regard,
No.
Not that one, no.
but you could continue with it as it is indefinitely, if I'm understanding it correctly. No one has raised any issue for the city that you could continue indefinitely with with the present structure.
Yes.
So there's no end to that grandfathering at this point. And whether or not you could prevail, in court saying that your variance, was appropriate if it was based on that grandfather, you don't know. Okay. I do have a question regarding the bank behind you, and also the lane which is behind you, which I believe you also own, even though the city hasn't developed that. You probably are familiar with the building just across the street from you, the Marcus Key building.
Yes.
And you're aware that the bank behind that has washed out numerous times and come in, into the back of the property. Is the bank as solid as you say that you, because it looks to be a much more solid bank? It doesn't,
Yes, it is pretty much solid rock.
And I've spoken with the owners of the building there, and they also had the same concerns. And our back is pretty much solid rock. We have one small corner where I park my vehicle where it's not solid rock. We've had no issues from it as long as I've lived there for over 3 years now.
I'd like to know too where the storm sewers are. Further down the street, there have been problems with storm sewers. And if, for example, there are problems in the storm sewer which require, owners and the city eventually to have to do some other work, I would think that they're probably under your existing front,
They're under the front parking lot.
under your front parking lot. So if you have a failure like the city encountered further down the road, it's going to be under a building at that point. I'd like to also ask, at this point, I don't think anybody is raising the issue as to whether or not you can put a temporary building for storage over there, as long as it's not a permanent. You had a very unsatisfactory building there before, and no one contested your right to keep that at that point. Is that still an option? If you're not given an attractive option for putting something up and you can retain what you've got, can you put a temporary storage building in there, or does that require the same kind of clearance from the city?
For my kind of business, a separate outdoor storage unit would not be optimal.
I didn't raise that. I would tend to concur with that. I just didn't, we weren't talking about what was optimal. We were talking about what could be done.
I really don't know, whether you could put a temporary storage building there or not. Just have to apply to the city and see,
hope.
because I really don't know. Ms. Smith could.
Well, that matter's not really, it's not really before us tonight. Mr. Lindsay, any other questions that you have for the witness, Mr. Fisher?
That'll suffice for now, yeah.
Ms. Sheila, I'll turn to you and ask if you have any questions for the witness.
Pretty much what I want to know.
All right, thank you, Ms. Sheila. Mr. Fisher, I just want to make sure I understand clearly your testimony tonight. You've talked about the fact that there are some options, I think, particularly in your interchange with Mr. Lindsay, and I think you indicated that they wouldn't be optimal. Is it my understanding, though, that there are options that are possible with the property to comply with the city's zoning ordinance?
Potentially. We also looked at, I believe, like a larger L shape going down the edges of the property, bringing in another potential retail space into the property, but that's not exactly in our scope, so.
That
Understand.
would be twice as much building as what we need.
I understand. I don't have any other questions.
Okay.
And so thank y'all very much. Does the city have any rebuttal or additional information you'd like to share? Ms. Smith, I'll invite you back up to the stand. Thank y'all for Mr. Fisher And Mr. Fisher? Ms. Smith, you indicated you've got some clarifying. I'd remind you, you're still under oath, and please feel free to share with the board.
Okay. Just a couple of comments about the proposals. Chad, let's bring this map back up. I just want to clarify, we are not suggesting that this be the exact building that be built on the site, merely that that was an example of how you could achieve the same square footage and accomplish their goals or their stated goals in the application of parking spaces on the site by maintaining that existing curb cut and crossover, because you would need that 42 feet, which would mean that building was 24 feet wide. Additionally, there are multiple buildings along West Union Street that are 25 feet wide and 100 and stuff feet long. So again, that would be consistent, a consistent format that is repeated throughout the downtown. But they do have, sorry, Chad, back to the map, 66 feet across here. So if there wasn't a desire to put additional parking spaces on the site, that building could be that same 32 feet wide that they had wanted it to be. So I just wanted to clarify that this wasn't the only building that could be built on the site. That was just an example to get them the same square footage. If they did desire a wider format, that also would fit on the site. Additionally, if we go back to what was proposed here, I think there was some mention of 20-some parking spaces, but with this design, they would only be able to get 6 parking spaces across through here. So they would actually get less parking spaces than with the other proposal. So you could fit approximately 6 spaces along through here. You would not have enough room to put parking spaces here and have both back up. So the only place to be reserved for parking that would make the most sense would be to put 6 perpendicular parking spaces, basically picking up these 6 spaces here and putting them over here, if that's 6. So actually, it would not be 6 if you have 32 feet wide minus, 99, about 6 spaces on that side. So I just wanted to clarify that from what the applicants had said about the number of spaces. To answer Mr. Lindsay's question, the city doesn't have a temporary option for buildings. We don't have a temporary permit unless you're a school construction trailer or a construction site thing. So any building would need to meet that.
Thank you, Ms. Smith. Mr. Carswell, any questions, Ms. Smith, at this point?
Ms. Smith, can you tell me what year this ordinance was adopted?
It came into effect January 1st, 2015.
2015. In the ordinance, where we say we want to provide a concentration of activities in pedestrian-oriented settings, that doesn't occur at the laundromat, doesn't occur at Jay's, and it doesn't occur at the dry cleaners, right?
It does, well, the dry cleaners is probably questionable, but the rest of them, no. There's a variety of options of what happens along the CBD, and it's the zoning ordinance's intent to have rules for when you want to change something to your property.
So if
Not-
these 3 wanted to change something, they probably wouldn't be able to meet the zoning ordinance itself as far as the 0 to 5.
If they wanted to add on to their building, then they would need to come up to the frontage. For example, you mentioned the laundromat. We've had discussions with them about what they would like to do
Yeah,
with their property
okay.
in the future.
Okay, I know you didn't probably have a whole lot to do when the ordinance was passed, but was this type of area taken into consideration that there were already buildings there? They had been there since the 60s
sir.
and the 50s, et cetera?
Yes, sir. That is common across America, that you have existing development and you have what you would like to see in the rest of the development. It is my understanding that there was a substantial amount of community consultation that was undertaken, similar to what we just did with our recent comprehensive plan when the zoning ordinance was developed, and that was taken into account in development of these standards. As you noted, I was not here at the time, so I cannot specifically speak to that, but that is, in addition, it's just what you do in a CBD.
The one diagram that I saw where it was just only a suggestion, I understand, of how that could be built. Did you come up with anything else, a design concept besides that one?
Yes, as Mr. Fisher mentioned, we looked at I don't know if I can kind of draw it with my mouse on the screen, if you guys can see my mouse moving. So we looked at an L shape that would come out to here
Okay,
of the building. Again, there was options of going up. Again, may not be desirable for the applicants, but if you were to bring this building to be a true CBD building up to the front, a building in front of that building that's there, that would give them 3 separate properties almost, similar to what you would see along West Union, or even adjacent to them along the street, if we look at that similar format. Let's see if we look at these buildings down here, in kind of a similar size. Again, it's not our job to come up with designs, it's merely our job to enforce the ordinance and to try to bring those buildings to the street when an applicant wants to make a change. I think there was a question about grandfathering. I don't know if it was a question or not, but very important point to note, required to do anything with the zoning ordinance unless they want to change their property. And there are different levels of change. The landscaping and parking standards kick in when you expand a building by more than 20%, and this is saying this is almost more than double, I think, what they have now. When you change the frontage of a building by more than 50%, then the building design standards kick in when you do a change of use for your building. So if this building went to an office or something, then not the building design standards, but the landscaping and parking standards would change. So it's all of the changes, all of the standards in the zoning ordinance are built around the applicant or the property owner wanting to make a change to their property, and then they have to follow the new rules.
let's take a hypothetical of the property that's for sale right across from the hamburger and the courthouse, there, the big property there.
The vacant
Yeah, the
parking
vacant
lot?
property
Yes,
there.
sir.
Are these people aware that of this ordinance? How are they aware of this? Do you tell them, or?
Well, most people are aware that own property, that there are development rules. Whenever anyone comes in and wants to develop, for example, I had a conversation about that property on Friday, about what could be developed on that property. So whenever someone wants to do a development, their first call is generally either to zoning or a building officer, and they say, let's come in, let's have a meeting about what you can do. And our typical response time is to spend about an hour with each applicant, going over all of the standards in the zoning ordinance so that they know before they start to move one shovel full of dirt, what they're required to do, before they pay one bank deposit on a new property. I don't want you to purchase that property if you can't do what you want to do. The saddest times in the office are when someone has already signed a lease or already purchased a property and then they can't do what they want to do. So we take a long time going over that with people, as we've done with the multiple meetings here, to try to give options.
Mr. Carswell, any other questions for Ms. Smith?
Thank you for that clarification, Ms. Smith. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Britton, any questions for Ms. Smith?
No, not at this time.
Ms. Lindsay?
Yes, I would like to raise the question of how constrained they are to the rear. I don't know that the 2015 ordinance addressed topographical differences, but that it seems to me that even though they own the quote lane that's behind them at this point, that given the extremity of that topography, they can't really expand to the rear. And so, you know, you know, to put parking in or, you know, so, you know, at this point, how do people address that? They're not the only people that have had that, who would have that particular issue, but
Well, their property line is the rear boundary, so no one can expand beyond their property line. So I'm not sure
they
what
own
your question
they
is.
own, quote, the undeveloped lane behind them, so presumably they could go up to that. But the topography was limiting. When the original structure was built, obviously, they didn't have to deal with the 2015 ordinance that was adopted. And I don't know how much role topography played in that.
I don't know either. I'm not sure that's relevant to this application because they're not asking for a setback or a change to the rear property boundary. They're only asking for a reduction to the front property boundary. I think I'm
Mr.
not
Lindsay?
be understanding
you
your
ha-
question.
I'm sorry to interrupt, Ms. Smith.
No, that's fine.
Mr. Lindsay, do you have any other questions for Ms. Smith?
Not in this context.
All right. And Ms. Sheila, or any questions for Ms. Smith? Thank you. The chair has no further questions. Thank you, Ms. Smith. Absolutely, sir. Please come forward and let Ms. Smith grab her things, and
Thank you.
podium is yours, sir. I would
Okay.
remind you, you're still under oath, of
Yes, sir.
course, and so please proceed to share with the board.
Okay, well, my question is, if I expanded the building 2 years ago and built on to the left, or to the right side of it, if you're facing the building, and if we change the address to that building where it is off of McDowell Street, why can we not go straight back with our building?
Mr. Fisher, I appreciate the question and I appreciate the comments. As the chair, I'd remind you that this board, as I set forth at the beginning of our presentation tonight, has the requirement of considering your application that you have presented formally to the city for purposes of a 64-foot setback.
Yep.
And whether or not that constitutes a hardship in order for us to allow us to deviate from the zoning ordinance of 0 feet to 5 feet. So that's a very narrow issue that we've got to deal with tonight, not considering hypotheticals and potential other options and that sort of
Okay.
thing.
All right, thank you.
All right, yes, sir, and I appreciate you, thank you. Any, Ms. Smith, if you're welcome to, but I don't know that it's necessary to, in light of the fact that it's not relevant for tonight's purposes. So in light of that, at this point in time, we'll transition to the board's deliberations for purposes of deciding whether or not to grant the applicant a variance from the city's ordinance. I would remind everyone that when we vote, that there will be a requirement that there be a 4/5 approval of a variance. But before we entertain any sort of motions or take any action, I'd like to have a moment of deliberation and afford the members of the board to make any comments they would like to make with regard to our responsibilities tonight vis-a-vis this application and the request that's been made. Mr. Carswell, I'll turn to you in the order we've been proceeding. Do you have any comments you'd like to make about the matter before us tonight?
No, sir, I don't.
All right, thank you. And Mr. Britton, any comments you'd like to make?
No.
All right, Mr. Lindsay, I'd like to hear from you if there are any comments you'd like to make before we entertain any motions.
No.
Thank you, Mr. Lindsay. Ms. Shelor, any comments you'd like to make? All right, and the chair, in his discretion, would just say that I, on behalf of the City of Morganton's Board of Land Use Adjustment, am very appreciative of the manner within which the witnesses have shared and informed us of the issues tonight. I think that for me, what I've wrestled with is to try and understand how the property is, or the property owners are in a situation where they have no options available to them to be able to be in compliance with the city's ordinance. And instead, what I've heard tonight is not optimal, not feasible, may cost a bit more, that there really isn't any significant hardship with regard to the 3 feet differential in land variance from back to front. That might cost us a bit more money if we, in fact, we may have to re-roof the building, but may cost us a bit more. But there are options that are available to be in compliance with the city's ordinance. And then the other comment I would make is that this body doesn't really have the ability to opine on the appropriateness of a zoning ordinance, whether it's right or wrong. That policy's already been decided by the city in 2015, and the manner within which city residents get informed of compliance with it really is not within the purview or the ability or the legal right of this board to opine on those issues. We have a very solemn duty, it's very straightforward, and it's to determine whether or not an undue hardship exists or unnecessary hardship exists with the property, whether the hardship results from conditions that are peculiar to the property. And then I think this language is fairly illuminating for me, that the hardships being discussed at the hearing result from personal circumstances as well as hardships resulting from conditions that are common to the neighborhood, such as granite, those kind of things, or the general public, and here's the dispositive language for me, may not be the basis for granting a variance. May not be a basis for granting a variance. And then the hardship did not result from actions taken by the applicant. And then finally, there's the public safety, substantial justice is achieved section. So those are my comments with regard to the testimony I heard tonight. At this point in time, having afforded every member of the board the opportunity to make comments, I would entertain a motion with regard to the variance request that's been made tonight by the applicants. Is there a motion to approve or disapprove the variance application? The chair is at a point where he's not hearing a motion to approve the variance. If we don't approve the variance, then we're not going to be able to move forward with granting the variance. And the matter would be at a point where the variance would not be approved. Is there a motion to, let me re-ask the questions. Is there a motion to approve the variance tonight? Chair has not heard a motion to approve the variance. Is there a motion to not approve the variance? I'm going to give my board members an opportunity to continue to weigh the matter so that we can do the business that we're asked to do by the city of Morganton tonight. Is there a motion concerning the variance?
Well, based on the requirements, it's quite obvious that I will have to, unfortunately, make the motion to disapprove.
Motion's been made to disapprove the variance application. Is there a second to the motion that's been made?
I'll second that.
Motion's been made and seconded. At this point in time, I would afford the members of the board the opportunity to make any comments or discuss the matter before we call the question. Any comments about the motion that's been made? In light of that, then I'll call the question. If you are in favor of denying the motion for the application in light of the findings that there is not an unnecessary hardship, that the hardship does not result from a peculiarity of the property, that in fact the hardship results from personal circumstances, Madam Clerk, as well as hardships resulting from conditions that are common to the neighborhood or the general public, and that the hardship does in fact afford the applicant options, does result from actions taken by the applicant, and then does not further meet the criteria set forth in the statute. All those in favor of denying the application, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, like sign. In the opinion of the chair, the votes carry the motion, and therefore the application is denied. Any further business for the board tonight? In that case, the board will declare that we are adjourned without objection. The Board of Adjustment for the City of Morganton is adjourned, Madam Clerk. Thank you.